feels like if you're not moving around fast and growing and getting promoted, then, there's stigma attached to it. But then the idea of taking those risks is also can produce a lot of anxiety.
People are really afraid that if they leave a job, they won't be able to simply walk into another one.
Right now, work feels pretty unstable. There are layoffs, AI hiring freezes, people sending out hundreds of applications and hearing nothing back. And there are all of these workplace buzzwords that are just flying around, things like quiet quitting, bare minimum Mondays, the great resignation. And today we're talking about another one of these buzzwords, job hugging. It's basically when you stay in a job that you don't really enjoy anymore because leaving it feels a bit too risky. And it's the opposite of job hopping, which is where you move around quite quickly between jobs to get better pay or a promotion. And I read an article by a business leader who said that if you're one of these job huggers, you're basically killing your future. So today we're asking if job hugging could be holding you back or if it's the right move in an uncertain world. I'm Hannah, and this is What in the World from the BBC World Service. We wanted to hear your experiences of the job market and job hugging at the moment, so we have been asking you to get in touch. This is Maddie in the US.
I think that job hugging is increasing due to a general sense of anxiety by young people. I think in the past you could really rely on your education and your professional network for job security, but nowadays things feel so much more fragile. And maybe it's just a game of comparison, but what I think is going on is that there's a lot of different factors like our healthcare being tied to our employer, and the fact that AI is a threat to several of our jobs that we had even a few years ago considered safe enough to go to college and study for.
We're going to get into this now with BBC Business reporter Emer Morrow. Welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me.
Given all of this economic uncertainty, it does make sense that people are sticking in these jobs. Is job hugging actually a new trend, or is it just a new name for something that, we were already seeing?
I think it is a new name for something that's not totally new. We are seeing more of it now because of the way kind of economies around the world are changing and how the labour market is changing. If you compare it to quiet quitting, so that was kind of a trend a couple of years ago where people were not going above and beyond in their jobs, kind of not maybe pushing themselves, not putting themselves forward for extra work, things like that. But they were staying in their jobs. And I think in that sense, job hugging is sort of like quiet quitting's kind of sad cousin, because either way you are staying in the job. But I think quiet quitting was a bit more about agency. It was sort of taking back a bit of a sense of a work-life balance, but you weren't necessarily worried about losing your job. Whereas I think with job hugging, the thing is people are worried that there could be layoffs, there could be cutbacks in their job. So they don't want to look a bit further afield and just hang on to the security that they already have.
What do the numbers say about how many people are job hugging at the moment? And is it something that we are seeing in younger workers, people earlier in their careers?
Yeah, so basically the way you would measure this is the number of resignations. So to take one example, in Singapore, obviously, big kind of banking and finance hub, lots of kind of coming and going from jobs normally. In Singapore, resignations are lower now than they were after the 2008 financial crisis. For any viewers and listeners who might be too young to remember that, that was a time when companies everywhere were laying off people, cutting jobs. So you'd be kind of mad to leave a job voluntarily because there would be so little chance of finding something else. So I suppose it's the difference between if people think that there are better opportunities elsewhere, and right now a lot of people don't feel like if they leave their job tomorrow, they'll be able to find something, A, just find a job, and B, find something better than what they already have.
What are some of the reasons people give when they're asked why they want to stay put?
Yeah, AI is a big one. People don't know, and employers don't know. I think that was mentioned in that article that you mentioned. Employers don't know kind of what AI is going to do to their businesses, to their workforces. So employees don't really know if they could be basically replaced by a computer in a few years. So they want to kind of hang on as long as they can so they can see what the lay of the land is going to be like. I think there is a big element as well of overcorrection in Gen Z. So when a lot of Gen Z entered the workforce kind of pre-COVID, job hopping was in vogue. People did really have this sense that why would you stay in the job you're currently in when you could get a better salary, better perks, better working conditions elsewhere. But now that there's kind of a correction to, there are a lot fewer opportunities for workers of all ages, but particularly younger people. The kind of workforce they entered is not the same as the workforce right now.
But there are also some benefits to staying in a job for a long time too, both to you in terms of your career, but also to employers.
Hiring people costs money. The more you have to do it, the more money you're spending on recruitment. Low turnover is what companies want. So people staying in roles for a long time helps that. But there is that bit of friction there of employees are saying, well, if I can go to this place, why would I stay here unless you give me better benefits? Whereas employers right now are saying, well, there are no other places, or there aren't very many other places. So, I don't really care. Stay here if you want.
Yeah. From a risk perspective, job hugging is seen as the opposite to growing, taking risks. What kind of issues does it create for companies and for people who end up stagnating in jobs?
Yeah, so disengaged staff is really bad for business, and in turn, that's really bad for the economy. So last year, it's estimated that employee disengagement cost the world $10 trillion in lost productivity. So basically, if you're spending X amount of money on staffing employees, you want to see a good return on your investment, essentially. But if you flip that around, you have all these employees saying, well, why are you just treating me like a number? Why are you just treating me like another big cog in the machine? I'm not going to go above and beyond if I don't feel like I'm getting my return on my investment. And there was another study that found that employee well-being increases when they have that kind of intrinsic sense of value at their work. They feel like, their job is going to get better, their pay is going to get better in the future. When employees don't feel like that, like a lot of them do now, partly because of AI, that can create problems for employers.
That article that I think we both read, where the business leader says that job hugging is killing your future, that kind of sent a bit of a spasm. I was like, okay, if you're staying in something until you're, feeling comfortable and gaining the skills, are you actually potentially damaging your future career prospects? Is that fair?
I think it really depends on where you work, what kind of industry you're in, what your role is. But I think that's that sort of assumes that you're in a field that, say, is going to be taken over by AI. I don't think there's many kind of plumbers, nurses, farm labourers who are particularly worried about AI coming for their jobs. And the reason they're not worried is because they have skills that AI can't replicate. So there's a huge element of kind of what skills do you have in this conversation. And one study found that if all the world's workforce was 100 people, 59 of those would need upskilling by 2030. So it's all about kind of, if you can find opportunities elsewhere that will give you the tools and give you the skill set to be more resilient against things like AI and cutbacks, should you stay or should you go?
So it's particularly the tech sector.
I think the tech sector is a good kind of canary in the coal mine because, again, if you think back to pre-COVID, and COVID wasn't necessarily the cause of all this, but I very much see pre-COVID as the tech companies, they couldn't expand fast enough. They wanted more workers than they had because they had all this work to be done. Whereas now a lot of them are kind of maturing as companies because they were these really rapidly expanding startups, back at the kind of start of the 2010s and further back into the noughties. But they're slowing down in their kind of output. Some of them, like Facebook, have invested a lot of money in the metaverse, which hasn't really worked out too well financially for them. So they're making cutbacks, they're slowing down. So their workers are thinking, instead of going from one tech company to another to get better pay, better whatever, I'm going to stay where I am because there are no other companies offering me better pay right now.
And there's this emotional pressure as well. Like, it feels like if you're not moving around fast and growing and getting promoted, then there's stigma attached to it, that you're seen as stagnating. But then the idea of taking those risks is also can produce a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, and I think anxiety is the big kind of over-looming factor when it comes to job hugging. People are really afraid that if they leave a job, they won't be able to simply walk into another one. And if they do, it won't be as good as what they have now. Whereas I think if you go back 6 or 7 years, in a lot of industries, like, it was staying in your job was like leaving money on the table. It was like, why would you show loyalty to a company if they're only going to give you, say, a 1% pay rise, whereas you can get a 5% pay rise if you move to this job, and then you can get another one if you move to that job in 10 months. That's not really the case now.
If we go to early careers, how long should people be staying in their first or second jobs? How do you know when you've outgrown a role and you're at risk of hugging it?
I think it goes back to that skills thing. So if you are kind of in a position where there is no obvious next step for you, like the next kind of rung up on the ladder, and your employer isn't giving you any kind of opportunities to upskill and to develop yourself and your skill set so that you could move into another slightly higher role, I think that would be kind of a sign for me to either look elsewhere or look to see where you can kind of be a bit more proactive and upskill by yourself. I think historically companies invested a lot more in their workers in the sense of like they would train you to do certain things. But as the companies kind of make cutbacks and they want to sort of, make kind of cost savings here and there without affecting the bottom line, they're less willing to kind of pay for their employees' training, pay for, kind of various upskilling seminars, qualifications, things like that.
Yeah. So if you've been in a role for a couple of years, you feel like, hey, I've got this, I've got the skill set. Actually, maybe a smart move would be to hug your job whilst also beginning to update your CV, look for opportunities elsewhere, put in those applications if they are available.
Yeah, I mean, a good kind of rule of thumb is it's easier to get a job if you have a job. So a lot of kind of career coaches and kind of experts in this area would say kind of don't just leave a job with no plan. And like a plan could be, doing a master's, doing some sort of full-time kind of upskilling and training education. But generally speaking, employers like to see that you're in a role right now, because it means you're sort of a little bit more proactive and you might stay at the company a bit longer.
That's really helpful. Emma, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
If you have got thoughts or questions about this episode, please do get in touch. You can leave us a comment below. We're on WhatsApp, we're on Instagram at BBC What in the World. And while you're here, you might want to check out an episode that we did recently on grads struggling to find jobs. We focused on India, where nearly 40% of grads under the age of 25 can't get a job. And we heard from people about how they get through the daily grind of job hunting, applications, interviews, and dealing with all of that family pressure. So have a look at that and let us know what you think. That's it from me today. I'm Hannah. This is What in the World from the BBC World Service, and we'll see you next time.